السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. وبعد, this is inshallah ta'ala the first episode of our classes, not classes, يعني audios in Usul Fiqh. I don't plan to do really classes on Usul Fiqh. يعني I did have plans before, but I think I might change my plans because Usul Fiqh requires knowledge in the Arabic language. So it's going to be hard to explain it on English, really. However, inshallah ta'ala, I will try to simplify it in these audios as much as I can. And inshallah, if a person really listens to these in depth, there's no real way we're going to go. It's just any time I read a book or so, I find a fa'idah, I watch a rad, or watch a video or so, or read a book, as I said, or study a book or so, and I come with this something that I want to talk about in this series, inshallah, I'll do it. So today, inshallah ta'ala, our topic is why did Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu oppose praying in places where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed. So the story is that the Prophet ﷺ once stopped at a place and prayed there while traveling. After that, some of the Muslims thought that because the Prophet ﷺ prayed there, they should also pray there. But Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu forbade this. He said the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians, were destroyed because they followed the traces of their prophets and turned those places into churches and places of worship. So if you happen to be there and it's time for prayer, then pray. Otherwise, don't pray just because the Prophet ﷺ prayed there. This is mentioned by Shaykh Islam in Ath-Thauri al-Mustaqim. I don't remember honestly the page. I don't remember honestly. But you can search on Shamila with no, this is not the Ikhtas al-Mustaqim. This was in Kitab al-Wasila, if I'm not mistaken. Kitab al-Wasila of Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah. If you check the tahqiq of Shaykh Rabi' al-Madkhali, point number 567 or 568, I think that may be it. So why did Umar radiallahu anhu forbid this? Because the Prophet ﷺ did not pray there to make that place special. He didn't pray there because of the place. He just prayed there because that is where he stopped. But after, I'm sorry for the sound in the background. I really apologize for the sound in the background. But if people after him started praying there to imitate the Prophet ﷺ, then they are giving that place a special status without a reason. This is imitating the action but not the intention. This is very important. I will speak about this in a second. So Umar radiallahu anhu warned us, imitating the Prophet without understanding his intention can lead into a bid'ah, just like what happened to the Jews and the Christians. So Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi explained this by saying that true following is not just copying what he did, but it's also following him in both action and the intention. And we need the action and the intention that the Prophet ﷺ had to follow him in that. So if the Prophet ﷺ did something for a specific reason and you copy it thinking it's a special act of worship, then you're changing the religion. You're adding something into the religion. Because you made something act of worship without a proof, and the default in the acts of ibadah is that they're not allowed until we get proof that they are allowed, and the default in the rest of things is that they are allowed until we get proof that they're not allowed. And this is also something in usul or the qawa'id. The default for acts of ibadah is that they're not allowed until we get proof that they are allowed, and the default in the act, in the general things, is that they are allowed until we get proof that they're not allowed. Eating specific food, or drinking specific drink, going to a specific place or so, these things. But if we believe something is an act of ibadah, we need proof for it from the Qur'an, the Sunnah, the ijma', the sayings of the Sahaba or so. طيب. So here you're not you're copying the Prophet ﷺ in what he did outwardly, but not in the intention itself. So an example is that the Prophet ﷺ sometimes sat briefly before standing up from the sujood. So the scholars disagree. Did he do that because he was tired, or is it a sunnah? So depending on this reason, why he did it, alayhi salatu wassalam, the ruling changes. If he did it to be a sunnah, then this is a sunnah without a doubt. And if he did it because he was tired, he wanted to sit before he would get up, because he was tired, he couldn't just directly get up, then this is of course not a sunnah. So not everything the Prophet ﷺ did is a sunnah, and not every act of the companions is a sunnah. As an example, Ibn Umar touched the Prophet's seat out of love and respect, but this is not something the Prophet ﷺ taught the Sahaba to do. So it's not part of the sunnah. The same thing when Ibn Abbas made dua in Basra on the day of Arafah. So not every act of the Prophet ﷺ is directly just because he did it as a sunnah. This is something that a lot of people don't understand. And not every act of the companions is a sunnah. So if it wasn't something that the Prophet ﷺ taught or approved of or encouraged, then even if a companion did it, it doesn't mean that it is a sunnah. So the key is why did the Prophet do this? Why was the intention for him to do this? So here we've discussed this before in the classes of the science of hadith. We said that the sunnah is of four types: al-qawliya wal-fi'liya wal-iqrar wal-sifa. That which the Prophet ﷺ says, that which the Prophet ﷺ does, that which the Prophet ﷺ he sees and he does not deny and say that it's not allowed, and how he looks or so, his body and so. So if we look at it in the side of usul fiqh, particularly for us, for the Hanabila, we say that the actions of the Prophet ﷺ are not automatically, just because he did it, taken as a sharia, unless one of the following conditions exist. Number one, أن يكون فعله بيانا للواجب, that it explains a command or an obligation. أن يكون مقصودا للتشريع, that he did it with the intention to make it a sunnah. And third, that there's a sign showing that it was meant to be followed. أن تقترن به قرينة تدل على استحبابه أو الوجوب. طيب. So if the Prophet ﷺ does something without commanding it or encouraging it, it's not a sunnah by itself. So if the Prophet ﷺ prayed in a specific place while traveling, but didn't teach people to pray, didn't teach the Sahaba to pray in that place, then this doesn't make this a special place. طيب. And Ibn Taymiyyah here, he says that the Prophet ﷺ, he just prayed there because he stopped there, not because it's a sunnah. طيب. Because he didn't intend with that to make it a sunnah. He just sat there and then, or not sat, but he just, because he was traveling, he got off and he prayed there. Bas. So the other things is because the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, the actions are judged by their intentions. So someone might imitate the Prophet ﷺ in an outward way, but with the wrong intention. Like if you try to gain extra reward by praying in a place just because the Prophet ﷺ prayed there without understanding that he didn't do that to make that place a sunnah. So you resemble the Prophet ﷺ outwardly, but the Jews and the Christians inwardly, because they exaggerated the places of their prophets. So outwardly it looks like a sunnah, but inwardly it's a bid'ah. طيب. Plus we have in the usul fiqh, we have a principle that if something, this is called of sadd al-dhara'i', if something leads to an innovation or to a shirk or to a corruption, even if that thing is not haram in itself, then it has to be stopped. So as an example, Umar radiallahu anhu, he stopped these people because he felt that it could eventually lead to people glorifying these places like the Jews with their churches over the Prophet's grave, like the Jews and the Christians did. So he forbade it, even though it's not haram in itself, to block the path to this thing being innovated. And the Hanabila specifically, we see that the Sahaba may act upon their ijtihad when there is no specific text. So some of the actions of the Sahaba are not a binding sunnah. Just because they did it, it became a sunnah. I apologize about the sound. I really apologize about the sound. Inshallah, not next episode, but from this series, I want to make an episode about the hujjiyat of the Sahabi. Is the saying of the Sahabi a hujjah? When does the saying of the Sahabi become a hujjah? I don't want to make these too long. I hope it's clear, inshallah ta'ala. بارك الله فيكم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.